If you're overwhelmed by all the types of acrylic paint out there, let me explain what you need to know. Hi there, I'm Janine. I'm an artist and I share my creative journey on this channel. I've been getting quite a few questions about acrylic paint because there's so many options to choose from, and if you're just starting out, it's just really overwhelming. I've picked a few of everything that I've got in my collection, which looks like a lot of different brands, different types of acrylic paint, but you by no means need all of these. I've collected them over the years, so I haven't bought them all at once. Please don't go out and spend lots of money on all types of acrylic paint. The purpose of this video is to help you decide what you need for your art practice and what you might want to try someday. You'll find a lot of different viscosities out there, which basically just means how runny the paint is. So I'll show you the different types first. The type of acrylic paint you probably think of first is heavy body acrylic paint. It is very thick, and also why a lot of people don't like working with acrylic, because it's got this kind of pasty, toothpastey consistency. Let me show you. So these two are golden. They're the same type of paint, just in a different packaging. This is a larger size. This is a small size. And this is a Liquitex, also their heavy body paint. You'll usually find it on the packaging. Here it does say heavy body acrylic. On the golden ones, it says it here on the back, golden heavy body acrylics. Yeah, heavy body acrylics. You can see it really well when you open this tub, how thick it is in there. Nothing is moving in there. You can see little peaks. So if you take that out of the tub, you see it doesn't come off. It doesn't come off my palette knife. It stays as it is. And if you put it down, it just stays like a big blob. It's great if you want to use, if you're into brush marks, so you can really see. Let's get a thicker brush. So if you've got not a super fine brush, but a more like a kind of textured brush, if you then go through, you see how you can see the brush marks here. Because it's so thick, it really leaves the ridges on here. And this is obviously the same. I'll also show you the Liquitex, which I'm not sure I've used this one before. I ordered that by accident once. It's not as thick. The thickest one I've come across is the golden one. And this one is a little bit, just a touch softer, but still considered heavy body. And you see how you can see the marks here. And it really literally stays on the page. Not sure where that dark color came from. Then I have, this one is a Sennelier. I haven't used this in a while, so it might be dried up a little bit. Oh, here it comes. I don't have many of these. Yeah, this is also very heavy actually. So I would consider that a heavy body if it stays like that. Then the next thing you might come across is the one I mainly use, but not necessarily for their consistency, but I'll talk about that in a minute. It's the Daler-Rowney System 3 acrylic. It's a very good price, which is mainly why I use it, at least here in the UK. If you're in the US or somewhere else, it might be a little bit more expensive if it's imported. So these are exactly the same type of paint. This is older packaging, and then they changed to these plasticky ones. This is just a bigger size, and then this is the huge size that I use, because I use a lot of it, or at least in the colors that I use a lot. And that one is a little bit more of a medium body, so it's not as heavy. You see, it still stays, but it is much softer. So if I then use my brush, you can still see the brush strokes, but they're a little bit more liquid than in the golden. I don't know if you can tell. This is the golden. This is the System 3. And then we get into the more fluid paints. So there's a few. When I started out, I used pretty much only these kind of paints, but I haven't used them in a while, so I'm not sure which one's the most fluid. This Liquitex I've actually never used, but I've been meaning to try it. I've just been waiting for the right moment. So this is the Liquitex you see here, soft body. Soft body rather than the heavy body on here. And everything comes in different packaging, so you might end up buying one where you prefer the type of packaging. Like this has got these little spouts, which I particularly like. So that is more fluid than this one. It's a soft body, but it's not fluid. This brush again. You can still see the brush marks, but they're getting much, much softer. And then especially if you use a softer brush, then you wouldn't see the brush marks. Definitely not as much. You also wouldn't use a brush like this if you don't want to see the brush marks. Let me just show you for comparison's sake. This is a soft brush, and if I then, you can still kind of see the brush strokes. Then I have this Matisse Flow, which, as far as I remember, is a little bit softer than the soft body. Well, that's separated somewhat. Let's see if I can get it to mix a bit better, because it's not like this. It was a bit much, but yeah, you see, that is very similar actually to the Liquitex. Yeah, I'd say that's very similar. And then there is, again by System 3, you remember this one was System 3. They also do, fairly new, a fluid acrylic, which I haven't used much. I've bought this white to test it once, but I haven't really used it. So that is a little bit softer than these. Probably can't see that very well because it's white. You do still see brush marks, but it's because of this brush. It's definitely softer. Let me just add another blob so you can see that better. You see it starts running, that one. It's definitely more liquid than these. And then I have the golden, which I love this, but it's very expensive. But they're very pigmented, which is why I love them. Yeah, you see that is very, very liquid. That just drips down. Let's do the brush test. It's hard to see because it's a dark color, but yeah, less brush strokes. And then the last thing that is not technically acrylic paint, I think, but I'll include it here anyway, is acrylic ink, which is just a much more liquid form. I don't actually know what they use as a binder, but this is obviously even more liquid than the fluid acrylic. See that runs properly. And for the sake of testing, let's just do the brush test. Yeah, it's ink. You can probably imagine what it's like, even if you haven't used it before. Now, like many other artists, I really don't like painting with the heavy body acrylics. And even the medium body is a little bit too heavy for me. I prefer more of a soft, sometimes fluid, but I think more of a soft because it's more versatile consistency. So if you buy heavy body acrylic, or if you buy a very fluid acrylic, you might not know that you can actually change the consistency. So you can turn this into a fluid and you can turn this into a thicker consistency. Now the way to do that is with mediums. You've probably been overwhelmed in the art store when you saw mediums, especially if you're a beginner. I will address mediums in a separate video, but for this purpose, You've probably seen that you can get gel mediums. You can get heavy gel, or you can get more liquid mediums like this flow medium or airbrush medium. So from heavy to fluid. And obviously, if you mix a heavy body paint with a liquid medium, it's going to become more liquid. And if you mix a gel, a heavier gel, with a fluid paint, it's going to become heavier. For the purpose of this, I'm going to use soft gel because I don't have a heavy gel. I'll grab this palette knife. If I take some of the heavy body paint and I'll add some of this acrylic flow medium. This is by Jackson's, but in other brands, it's probably like an airbrush medium. And you can also, instead of this, you can use water, but it's better if you use a medium. So I'll just add a few drops of the medium and I'll just show you on here. So if you start off with a not very pigmented paint, it's going to be quite transparent. But if you start off with a very pigmented one, like the golden, they are very pigmented, then you can add more medium without it losing its opacity. So there's still little bits in here, but you see, all of a sudden, we have pretty fluid acrylic. Let's just use this brush. Yeah, it's lovely and very soft and almost fluid to work with. And you see it's still very pigmented actually, even though I used quite a lot of the medium. On the opposite end, if you have a liquid paint and you want this to be a bit heavier, actually I have this one from Jackson's because this doesn't have the soft gel in it anymore. This one's from Jackson. This one's just called acrylic gel medium. So a bit more generic. You can see that's quite heavy. This is golden paint again, so it's very pigmented. If you do that with, I want to say maybe the System 3, then I wouldn't mix as much medium in with the paint because it will get transparent faster. And now, out of your fluid paint, you've made basically heavy body paint. It looks a bit lighter, but that's because the medium is in there. When the medium dries, it dries clear, which means it will dry the same color as that. And yeah, it's just behaves like heavy body paint. That is also a nice trick to save some money. If you buy expensive paint and then mix it with a cheaper medium, you can make your paint go a lot further. If you like this video, consider subscribing. You remember I said I use the System 3 Daler-Rowney, but I think it's a bit too heavy for me most of the time. I like it a bit more, a little bit softer. So what I do is I actually rarely use them from their original packaging, especially the big ones. I have these little condiment bottles. I just ordered them, I think, of Amazon. So in here, I mix my paint with some of the flow medium. And I also use a little bit of water to stretch it out even further. But I try not to use more water than medium. So this is a System 3 paint, and this one is actually, I use this one a lot. This is the golden one. So this is even heavier to start with. So I mix more medium into that to come up with kind of a similar consistency to what I have in here. So this is how I mainly use the paint. And then also I often pre-mix my colors, which you might have seen me do. And then I put them in these kind of tubs. So I've got smaller ones, but especially useful I find it in these larger takeaway containers. Or at least here in the UK, this is where takeaway comes in. And again, I mix the colors together, obviously. but then I also mix a little bit of the flow medium in and a little bit of water sometimes to make the consistency a little bit more fluid. And the reason why I like the big tubs, if I use a big brush, I don't have to faff around on my palette with a little blob of paint or have half my palette covered with paint. I can simply dip it into the container. That is very handy when I'm working on larger work with larger brushes. So you've heard me talk quite a lot about opacity and pigmentation, and what that is quite easy to see on this golden chart that I've got here, and also on the actual paint tubes a lot of the time. So this one, on golden heavy body paints and also on the fluid paints, they have a little stripe here. You can barely see that here. It's like black and white strip that they put a bit of the actual paint over, so you can see how opaque or transparent it is. So this is quite opaque. This is a little bit more transparent. And then they also have this color chart where you can see it pretty well. Like over here, you can see how opaque and transparent the whites is. The whites are, titanium whites always are more opaque and zinc whites are more transparent white. So see how this is quite transparent, but then this one is very opaque. And also cheaper brands, for example, System 3, they aren't as pigmented as, let's say, golden. So if there's less pigment, they will always look a little more transparent than a more pigmented version. But I don't really mind that for my work because I like to work with transparent layers anyway. It usually tells you somewhere on the tube, especially on the more artist grade tubes, if it's a transparent or opaque color. You see here on the Liquitex, it's got this little sign that says it's transparent. And the Daler-Rowney, I think it's this little square. These are all quite opaque colors. This one again, very opaque. And on the Liquitex here, it says transparent. Again, the fluid one has a little square to say it's opaque. What about this Matisse? Again, a little square to say it's opaque. If the square is not colored in, like in the Liquitex, then that means it's transparent. Sometimes you get a half filled in, half not, and then that is like a semi-transparent. And obviously, if you mix your paints with a bit more medium, then they become more transparent as well. By the way, golden, I just remembered, or saw it on here, was reminded, makes something in between the fluid acrylics and an ink, which are called high flow acrylics. I don't have that, so I can't show you. Let me just quickly show you actually. This one is a opaque color, and this one is a transparent color. So I can just show you over here how different that looks. So this one's transparent, and you can definitely see the color through. You can see the black through here. And then this one really covers it up. And I like a lot of transparent colors because I like glazing, which just means adding a transparent layer over something you've already got. So if I have a nice texture, let's say, and I really enjoy that, and I just want to add some different color to it, I can just, I think it's also supposed to be transparent, and just go over it, and you can still see the texture or what I've painted before through. And that's some really nice effects, I think, depending on how you use them and where you use them. Then another consideration that I don't care about, I'll tell you why in a minute. If a paint, it depends on the brand, it also depends on the pigment, if a paint is shiny or matte. So there's some complete ranges that are matte, For example, golden does a matte range, and the Liquitex are a little bit more satin, whereas a lot of the standard golden are quite shiny. Let's see if I can show you. See how this one, very shiny. This one, very matte. And often cheaper acrylics also are very shiny, which makes your painting look quite plasticky, which again is why a lot of people don't like acrylics. But what I do is I just add a varnish on top at the end anyway, and the varnish I usually use like a matte to satin sheen, and that will just cover the whole painting. So no matter whether you had glossy paint or matte paint underneath, it will all just have the sheen of the varnish. So I really don't care if my paints are glossy or matte. Now, one question I do get asked, should I buy a set? To which I would say a very basic set I think makes sense. One where you have a yellow, a red and a blue, because you can intermix them and pretty much create any color that you want. So you don't really need any other colors, especially if you have a warm and a cool yellow. For example, a cadmium yellow and a lemon yellow, and then a warm and a cool red. For example, a cadmium red and a magenta, and then a warm and a cool blue, for example, a ultramarine and a cerulean blue. Then you can definitely mix any kind of color that you'd ever want. And obviously you need some white. You probably need quite a lot of white. So if you have a set that has yellows, reds, blues, then I would get the set. But if you already know which colors you want to use, or maybe you already have the basic colors, then I wouldn't bother buying a set that has like greens and browns in it as well, because you can mix those. So a basic set with yellow, red and blue, I think makes sense, but you don't need any other colors in the set. Just veering off just a little bit off topic, for media that you can't mix, because obviously you can mix your paints to create other colors, but for example, soft pastels or some sort of crayons and pencils, I wouldn't buy a set. I would buy individual colors that you like, because you're going to use those colors. You probably, unless you really like a red, you wouldn't use the red pencil. But for any media that you can mix, I think a very basic set is a good idea. I hope this has helped you get a better overview of the different types of acrylic paint that are out there. I'm planning to do more of these videos on basic painting knowledge, and if you have any topic in particular that you would like me to cover, then please leave a comment below. If you want to know how I mix my colors, then you can watch my video up here. Thanks and bye bye.